All right, you guys ready? 3, 2, 1, hack. 1, 2, 3. Fellas, welcome to Radio Room Cowboy Time, episode 4. Gosh, I think I'm actually right this time. It's a Tuesday night, and we have got quite the lineup. Some last minute changes, so we're going to make sure we go to Lenny first while he's trying to prepare. But first, I got the lead. That's gravy. I've got a positive mental attitude. Lenny's dash 2. His loadout is a bunch of nerd things. Boyle's coming in as dash 3 with loads of PhD retired O6 Wasta, and then we got Roger on base, who is his loadout is Guapo y Fuerte, always strong. So we're just gonna run through a few things today. Got a question a day coming up for Lenny because it's a hot topic that I'm talking about a lot in my job. And then we got a few topics to go through. We're going to talk plan J-35. We're going to talk some Ukraine drone strike stuff, and then also maybe some new aviation tech, followed by a few other things. So without further ado, Leonard, question of the day.
Yeah, I think it
What
was questions of the day. You nested
questions?
like four or
Oh
five
man.
things in here. So
I
number
did.
one, you wanted to know what a combat radius is, and so
I do.
so I immediately went to Wikipedia, and they cite a joint pub one tag 02 DoD Dictionary of Military Terms. There's actually a thing out there. I wish I had that on the desk while I was in command. But ultimately, that's going to be the maximum distance that an aircraft can travel with a representative loadout, mission configuration, and then return to its point. So, it's not max range, right, which would be the optimized range or maximum distance that something could go one way. But it is going to, depend on a profile as well. So certain aircraft are going to take off low altitude, potentially fly lower altitude, then maybe climb up and optimize the profile. It also depends on loadout, and it can also depend on things like external fuel tanks, which could extend the range. So highly dependent. And then, your other four questions of the day that you gave me were to look at them for the F-35. And so I just pulled a Lockheed Martin F-35 fact sheet off their website. They'll state the minimum is what it looks like for the F-35A that they'll put as 590 nautical miles. That's within 18.2 or 18,200-ish pounds of internal fuel. F-35B minimum that they'll cite is 450 nautical miles. That's they'll cite a 13,500 internal load, and then the F-35C they'll cite a 600 nautical mile minimum combat radius with a 19.7 internal fuel loadout. So it's interesting numbers, right? You got about 1,500 more pounds inside in the C model, but Lockheed's only giving you an additional 10 nautical miles on the combat radius per the fact sheet. So, I think, again, those numbers are minimums. I think their fact sheet is just hearkening to all the factors that we brought up earlier about the profile and the loadout and the configuration. Depending on the ordnance you're carrying, that adds more weight, right? That's one of your four fundamental forces of flight that you're going to need to carry around with you. So that was 3, and then you also asked me the F-22.
I did.
So I went to the Air and Space Forces Association website there, and again, highly dependent, right? Depending on the loadout, the mission, and it can be anywhere from 460 nautical miles to 590. And another thing that's going to factor in for the Raptor, the F-22 there, is how it cruises, how it flies, because it is super cruise capable. So that would, according to the internet there in Air and Space Forces, potentially reduce the range slightly. So I think that's all your questions. What did I miss?
No, you got it all. Well,
All right.
you have anything to add, or do you have any other questions about type model series that Lenny can look up real quick
I
for you?
don't, but I think for all 17 parts of the 4 questions of the day, Lenny could have just answered all of them with the standard answer from MOTS 1, which is
It depends.
That's right. It depends.
Every time.
I should have. Next time, I'll just do that. Next time, I have question of the day, and then then I'll just say I'm out.
Yeah.
So
Anything of tactical relevance, you can always just hit with it depends. Well, so I really wanted to get into combat radius because I think it's an important thing for people to understand. And yeah, it always depends, right? It's loadout, weight, configuration, drag counts, altitude, winds, everything can go into combat radius, but it's a planning factor. So, as we all set out with planning factors before a flight, I think it's a good thing for guys that are kind of in the acquisition business and in the planning business. You can kind of hang on it. So, You can get on the map, you can draw the range rings, you can say, hey, if I've got a 590 nautical mile combat radius, then I know that I can fly this far. I can do this set of assumptions, then I can come home. And then we can actually start doing some fuel planning. So with that, I really kind of just want to jump into topic one because, one of the ways we kind of mitigate combat radius because we're always fighting on other people's front doorstep is with the boat, right? The big deck. So get the aircraft there, across the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, wherever you want to put it. And then now you can extend that combat reach, now to the end of the combat radius of the aircraft coming off of that asset. So first things first, man, we got an article in the War Zone about the J-35. And the J-35, maybe base can throw up a picture of it if they can find one. Guess what? It looks a whole lot like an F-35. Shocker.
What?
Another
No.
another Chinese aircraft that looks exactly like an American aircraft. I wonder how they got all of those ideas. And so the cool thing, and I want to say like all the Navy bros are probably super jealous because it actually has two engines in it, which I find slightly cool. But they also don't have the reliability of the engine, the single engine that we have in ours. So man, I mean, I got a bunch of fun facts about it and what's going on. So I just thought I'd tee it up and throw it to you guys and say, what do you think? Like this thing just popped out. A couple of J-35s. They got a whole bunch of stuff hanging off them. Looks like F-35 Cs. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you think?
Lenny, you want to go first since you're
Or
bringing
do you
the
need a
F
last?
thirty-five
Yeah,
C?
he needs a rest. Do you need a
Okay, he
rest?
Yeah,
needs a rest.
yeah.
Okay,
You
yeah.
go. You got it, Boyle. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll start with, well, certainly defer to both of you for your F-35 background. But anytime especially when it comes to looking at adversaries and new capability that they're bringing, and Gravy in our former life, I remember getting many a Intel update um, in in a certain headquarters, and they would talk about new capabilities, new things that are coming out, or even during exercises that adversaries might be doing, and oh, they moved this asset here. And my questions were always about like, well, okay, but what does that mean? What is the maintenance footprint that goes with it? An F-35 has got, um, some, like any new system, right? It's got some unique maintenance and logistical aspects that you need to think about and plan for. So how is that going to help or hurt the deployment of this new aircraft that's coming out? How far can it go? I think, Gravy, to your point with the questions of the day, and maybe you're going to hit us up with some facts and figures. But where can it deploy? How's it going to be used? It's great. It looks cool on the glossy brochure, but what are all the so what's that come behind all of those kinds of things? I know on one of the pictures it had the same little shark symbol that so did some of the other Chinese aircraft that are going on their aircraft carriers. Does this mean that they're going to look to make a carrier variant of this? Is that kind of the tipper? Have they tipped their hand to this? Okay, well, how does that now limit what it's going to do? Because you have to do some very unique modifications to aircraft to be able to put them on carriers. And Lenny, you've flown both the Bravo and the Charlie, so certainly the most about that. But all of the so what thing, yeah, like any good aviator, I'm like, oh, that thing looks cool, and they clearly stole all of our ideas. But and it looks good in an air show, but what's the so what behind it? The logistics, the maintenance, the weapons, how fast does it take to turn an aircraft? All those kinds of things that are the true kind of combat indicators in my mind for how can this thing be employed? Is it, what is the real threat behind this? Or is it just a paper tiger or a paper dragon in the case of the Chinese that's out there?
I mean, what I'm tracking on this thing is it's got folding wings, tail hook. It's got the reinforced nose gear. I don't see really a whole lot of information, at least on the open source, on approach speeds or ranges or anything like that. Like that's some stuff that I think we probably have to observe in other venues. But yeah, I'm not really seeing anything. But we have to assume AESA radar, electro-optical tracking, targeting system. We have to assume some pretty robust signature management as well. And the big question that everyone always likes to throw up is like, well, what about their engines? Are their engines any good? Everyone's like, oh, our engines are garbage. I'm like, well, I mean, they're they're moving pretty fast. I know there's a lot of material science in our engines that are still supposedly ahead, but my guess is their engines are probably pretty good too. But I don't know any of those answers, and I don't know, Lenny, if you know any more about it than I do, other than just within what I can read on the Google.
No, I think I'm going to give your it depends right now. I'll cash
I'll
that
take
chip
it.
in, right? So,
Approved.
um,
No more
Valid.
mulligans. Just say
you know,
it depends.
yeah, it does depend, right? Because right now you're saying this is fairly new, right? You know, unverified. To my knowledge, there's no other, stealth aircraft that they've tried to operate off a boat yet. And I think, Gravy, you and I both probably had a lot of lessons learned,
Oh yeah.
in a fairly mature program that we have here in the U.S. and with our, partners for F-35. And so to say that suddenly this thing is a monster that's out there, and tying it back to Boyle's initial comments, like, well, let's see. Let's see how it does on the ship. Let's see that logistics footprint. Let's see how sortie rates start coming out as the thing comes online, and then see if it's still maintaining those sortie rates. A few months later, right? So there's going to be a lot that needs to be proven out, other than just a designed airplane that you're quoting us facts on right now.
Well, yeah, and the boat as well. So I wonder, do you think their pilots call it a boat too? Kind of the same way we call it a boat in this
Well, they probably call it
sort
a
of
ship, like all of it,
like pejorative way, the Boat. But so, the boat's got stuff like it's the Fujian, the new one, it's got like EMALS, that electromagnetic launch system, which is interesting. I think didn't we give that up? I can't remember. But they've got some other stuff that's pretty interesting, and I tend to agree. But the one thing I notice about the Chinese in their pursuits is they seem hungry, man. Like they seem hungry. Like they're pushing hard. Something tells me when a 3-day weekend comes off, they don't leave like, noon the day prior. That's my guess. You know what I mean? Like they seem like they're probably getting after it because they got something to prove apparently. Anyway, that's just kind of like my thoughts. They just seem hungry. So I think they're making up. I think they're making up quick. Lost time quick, and to me, a lot of the arguments that, well, they haven't been in a big war, and when's the last thing they got into? Is like a fist fight with the Indians on the border or something like that. It's like I think the preparation and hunger and desire and hustle can make up for a lot of that, and so I think it's concerning. Gosh, I wish it didn't look like an F-35, but I don't know. Maybe there's only so many ways to design a fifth gen fighter. Maybe we're all out of options and we all just came to the same conclusion. But like if you look at the European one that they're trying to put together, the Brits are trying to put together, guess what it looks like too? Just like an F-35. So I'm like, come on, guys. Let's try something new. Make it look like a Dorito chip or a Tic Tac. I don't know, something else. Okay. Anything else on that you guys want to cover on J-35 business? Boyle, anything pop in your head that makes sense?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
just say 2 points. One
let's
to
do it.
Lenny's about y'all's experience with a very mature program, a lot of boat experience between you, and still lessons learned coming out of it. And I think about anytime a country is trying to get back into or that isn't as proficient as the United States at carrier operations. I think about Russia, and I think it was 2016 when they started getting involved in Syria, and they took their carrier and went from the Baltic and went all the way around and went through the Med and went all the way down to the Eastern Med. And on the first day of flight ops, I think one of their Su-30s, it took off and crashed in front of the boat, and then they turned the ship around and went back through the Med, back through Strait of Gibraltar, up around England, and then back to the Baltic. So, boat ops are hard. It's really, really hard. And Gravy, you talked about they're hungry. They are hungry. Nobody can doubt that. But again, you peel back the onion a little bit. And I'm not saying that we certainly need to respect it, but maybe not quite as 10 feet tall as we think. Who is the makeup of their force? A lot of draftees. These are highly technical aircraft. How motivated are these folks? You're right about the 3-day weekend, but how motivated are those folks on Tuesday morning at the 06 formation when they've already been drafted to be there, and now they're there in
Yeah.
the 06 formation? I don't know. All those kinds of factors play into it. You know, these are really hard technical things, and a test aircraft where you have your best engineers, your best pilots, your best folks. They're highly motivated. They're very trained, you know, very well trained, a lot of experience. But then it goes out to the fleet. You know, that's a different proposition altogether.
Now the good news is boat ops are highly observable, so
Yeah.
we'll be able to see how they're doing pretty quick. The blue helmets was new to me. Those are pretty bright blue helmets. Those outdo our white helmets by a lot. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. The whole point of the white helmet is with reflective tape is if you do end up in the water, maybe someone can see you, right? So I'm not sure blue is the optimum choice there
It's
for
like we already
your
learned that
personnel
lesson.
recovery. Yeah, but that's lesson one.
Well,
that they
maybe
probably
they're
just
already
learned.
planning
Yeah.
ahead for when, you know, we shoot them all down and they eject. They blend into the blue sky background, so you can't gun them in their
Ah,
shoes.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, this always made me wonder why in the world we wear camouflage flight gear. That made absolutely no sense to me. It should be hunter orange or like fluorescent yellow. So that way they could find my, comatose body bobbing in the water easier. I never like in training, man. I'm like, why am I not wearing hunter orange? Like, why am I dressed the color of the desert? It made no sense when we were training in the desert. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, probably just a money thing as always. I don't know. Anything else, Lenny? You got anything else you want to reattack on this thing now that you've thought about it a little longer?
no, I mean, like I said, it's one thing to design it; it's another thing for the rubber to meet the road and to take those operations to reality. And so it depends, and we'll see, and we'll be
Yeah.
watching.
Okay. Yeah. It depends on what season. Okay. So, segue on things that we are seeing, and that's topic number two, because I think this is like an enduring topic. We'll probably just have to keep coming back to this because we keep on learning new stuff. And that is drone strikes and drone operations in Ukraine and Russia. And it seems like every week something new pops up where some like massive strike occurred and a whole bunch of drones smacked into a whole bunch of stuff and a bunch of people died. So I think the latest one when I sent this email out to you guys was July 22nd. It was a major attack on Kyiv, 700 drones potentially in a single operation from the Russian side against the Ukrainians. And a bunch of strikes, 12 people dead or injured. It looks like, a handful might have died, but those numbers are always hard to understand. So pray for them, of course. But these drones, autonomous, largely enhanced with AI, and they're really coming along. So I know both of you guys track this closely, like I do, and the tech and what's out there, and then what our industry is doing, and of course we're watching what the other industries across the globe are doing. So just wanted to open this one back up and say, hey. What kind of lessons learned do you think we can glean for the U.S. side of the house, and because we're watching SecDef open it wide open right now. So over to you guys. I don't know, pitch in whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I'm rested, so I'll jump back in. And
He's back. He's
yeah,
back, folks.
He's back.
yeah,
Give him a shot.
yeah, and my thoughts go to our last episode and Boyle's comments on base defense, right? And that's kind of what it comes down to. And it seems like the drone tech is evolving, so fast. It looks like they were starting out with these, Iranian style Shahed drones, and they're big, right? So very early on in the conflict, I remember like looking on the news and seeing people put up like nets or netting to block quadcopters, and you could see these things, and they would just catch them, before they'd hit something and fuse. But now you've got like this, 400, 500 pound vehicle potentially with like 100 pound payload, and the ranges these things can go from their initial Iranian design to just how the internet is saying these things have evolved. It's that tech is evolving so fast, and I think that's why we had that topic last episode. Like, how do you stop this? What does that layered defense look like? All the points that we were talking about, that Boyle, you were talking about from your perspective of identification, right? Okay, now we're gonna shoot at this thing, all right? Then how do we effectively shoot them all when they're coming in those numbers? It is not an easy problem with how fast the drone tech is evolving. Like I said, from a basic, very old Iranian design to how they're, homemaking these things and doing great improvements on them. So I think that's number one. Like the tech is evolving very fast, and I'm not sure the defenses are there yet. Obviously, right? And that's what needs to have some horsepower put into it.
Yeah, Boyle, over to you.
Yeah, I would say, a couple things from this. I remember, I don't know, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, when Russia did its first big drone strike into Kiev. And I may get it wrong. It might have been 80 drones. I remember at the time it was like, holy cow, that's that's a lot. But then it was a month before they could recock and do something like that again. And so now what I'm getting to is the evolution of mass and the evolution of production that has happened. Where if you look at the numbers from, I think it's the Institute for the Study of War, they've got some graphs out there about how many strikes and how the numbers have increased with Russia and kind of the pulse frequencies they've been able to do. The point being, they're able to produce a heck of a lot more than they were 18 months ago. And they're able to put them out in greater numbers with new autonomy, new AI, new tactics, and new techniques that they're able to do. So now they're able to not only get mass, but they're able to sustain that kind of mass. But it took them, 2.5 years to get there, to get to this point, to be able to make that kind of mass. So, just a rhetorical question: what does that mean for the United States and production? When we talk about, freedom, if anybody's read Freedom's Forge, great book, the U.S. being the arsenal of democracy, and we talk about, we can pump out a Liberty ship, one a week. Well, that took us 3 years to be able to make one a week. The first Liberty ship took a year to make. And then we're able to find efficiencies and get faster and be able to create mass. And that's the same thing that's happened on the Russian side. On the defense side, for the Ukrainians, it's the tit for tat that goes with any kind of military technology and any kind of war, or as you're approaching conflict. And there have been times where the Ukrainians have been able to knock down every single one that's come at them. So the defense is greater than what the Russians were able to throw at them. In this case, the Russians were able to overcome what those defenses are, and it will just continue to iterate as it continues on. And so it's that evolution that's happening. What are we paying attention to? And hopefully we're drawing the right lessons and not the wrong ones. You have your acolytes who say, like, Ukrainian war, this is the future of war, this is how everything's going to happen from now on. Some people say, nope, there's little bits and pieces we need to take out of it, or it has nothing to do with what the next war is going to be like. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But, there's a lot with that, with both mass production, evolution, the tit for tat that goes back and forth, and how quickly can each side iterate over the other.
I'm gonna hedge with you, Boyle, on that completely. It's somewhere in between. If I'm gonna put my saw hat back on, I'm gonna think something more like World War One and the mass bombing campaigns that happened in World War One, where you were just trading these blows. Initially from the medium range fighters and bombers from the Germans, and then they get pushed back, and then you go to the long range fighters and bombers from the Allies, and then into the daylight bombing campaign. It's interesting when you start going against civilian populations, regardless of what weapon system you're using. It doesn't really seem to speed necessarily the war in the time domain. I mean, it does seem to like attrite, industry production capacity, but it does not seem to like stop the will of the people. Like I haven't seen the Ukrainians or Russians come out and be like, "Oh, that was a really crappy drone strike. Okay, we're done." It's over. That was a rough one. It seems to almost steal the populations on both sides, and both sides ramp up production. You can print these things out to some degree, and some of the larger ones, of course, you can't do that. Of course, you depend on a few microchips and a few other exquisite parts from different parts and supply around the world to put these things together. But it doesn't seem like warfare's changed. Of course, I think it's a standard, character or nature of war debate. Like the character's changed a little bit, but guess what? Things that explode coming from the sky, going against civilian populations and industrial targets. Maybe for an erosion campaign of some type. But I find the whole thing fascinating. Especially from the move, counter move, or tech, counter tech, however you want to go after it. But from the U.S. side of the house, I I've seen some really promising defensive tech. Because saturation defense, or defense from saturation, or swarm attacks, they got some pretty cool stuff out there. But what I don't understand, and maybe Lenny, better because you've got a better mind for science, and you don't have a strong liberal arts background like I do. But when you're going up against these drones and you've got your several layers of defense, let's not consider hard kills, right? So, skin to skin contact with something. Let's consider, jamming versus some type of, microwave weapon or, whatever that is. I've seen the stuff from Leonidas. That looks pretty cool. Is it Leonidas? Is that the name of the company? No, Epirus, excuse me. Another Latin word, whatever. So Epirus, some pretty cool tech. You've all seen the jammers and all that other stuff. You've seen the shoulder mounted jammers, which don't seem to do anything. So I'm just curious, like, do you have a thought on the, I didn't want to say non-kinetic because it feels like a laser's kinetic, but any type of weapon system that we could use defensively, where we don't have to now go to the field with like five or six different types of defensive weapons just for our formations to survive to the next day. So I just don't know how that works. So I want to ask you that question.
Yeah, I think it's hard, right? I think you hit on a couple that I log into LinkedIn now and I see companies advertising like microwave,
Yeah,
defense
I know.
things against drones. Like, and these videos are just playing on my phone. It's like, look at how many drones this thing can take out. And like, I don't know why it's getting tailored advertising to me. I'm not in the market for a giant microwave emitter, but
Making some
anyway,
money these days.
yeah, no, definitely not. But yeah. So like, sure, can you jam those kinds of potential frequencies, right? Can you use a microwave emitter and as these companies will advertise fry their electronics? Yeah, potentially, but it goes back to things we were talking about last time. Like, well, I need to know that they're coming. I need to know where they're coming from. If I want to jam, I need to have a good idea of what the signal is, right? So the effects can be optimized, and and even then, like a lot of those things that I was getting on the payload and poundage of those Shahed drones is from a Business Insider article, and they were talking about some guidance stuff too as well, where maybe it's not really intelligent guidance, maybe it is fairly indiscriminate, right? And that's why it's hitting civilian targets, which is not something that we in the U.S. look to do, right? We're very cognizant of trying to hit an actual military, an actual aggressor target. So it's hard, right? If there isn't really a signal like that it's using, and even if you had something like a microwave, you still need to have those other layers to know where it's coming from, to be able to shoot it, because you never want to shoot down the wrong thing either, one of your own aircraft. So yeah, it is a very tough problem. It's a complex problem, and it's going to involve a lot of iteration and a lot of testing and against complex scenarios. And I think we need to ramp that up, like you guys are saying.
Yeah, man. Boyle, what you got?
Just to pull the thread on, you brought up a great point, Gravy, about the combined bomber offensive of World War II as that kind of ramped up and iterated, and you had move and counter move between the Allies and the Axis. But the point about it doesn't really break the will of the people like the theory was in the interwar period, and after the war, the U.S. did I think it was called the Combined Bomber Survey. And I'm sad to admit this. Roger and I have done many series about both the 8th Air Force and the Bomber Command. I can't remember what the name of the survey was, but it was, hey, what was the morale effect on the population of the Germans who were under this constant 24-hour bombing? And the answer was they just got on with their lives. Yeah, they didn't like it, but very few civilians were like, oh no, we're being bombed. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey. Thank you, Base, who threw that out there. But they didn't think like, oh, now we're going to capitulate, we're going to surrender now. Same with the Brits during the Blitz of 1940. Tens of thousands of people died across the United Kingdom, and as they rolled into the next year, and the Germans started ramping up their bombing campaign in 41, they did a survey of like what are Brits most worried about going into the winter of 41, and the number one concern amongst Londoners was how much snow they were going to get that winter, not hey the Luftwaffe is going to come bomb my house or something like that. So people just learn to live with it. The population just learns to live with it. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but the idea that hey you're going to break the will of the people has kind of has not been proven out.
Yeah, so I guess from the operational standpoint, it's for the planners and the guys that are going to put dollars against industry to go do this type of thing. It's not to copy exactly what's happening over there in Ukraine and Russia. That's not necessarily how we want to get about fighting. And I think we always are hoping for short, sharp. decisive engagements, things that are going to give maximum political impact, because once you kind of go beyond that first wave and the thing draws out, everyone just kind of settles in for the long war, and that's not really ideal for anybody. But if the political will is to go out and engage someone along these lines with this kind of tech, then we've got to figure out how to use it in short, sharp, decisive, focused engagements, putting massive points at points of decision, right? Things that are going to move the will of the enemy to line up with our will. And so um, I find that the whole thing very interesting, that the more and more we get into this new tech, I start seeing the same thing, right? The trenches have gotten deeper. They now have got overhead cover, right? They now have multiple layers of nets in the entryways, so drones can't come fly in into their bunkers. But it's starting to look a whole lot like wars of the past. So I find that whole thing super interesting. I'll stop waxing poetic there with my big thoughts and wait for topic 3, unless you guys want to hit anything else on there. So you guys want to jump in on anything else there? Next, okay. I love this next one. Okay. Uh, can someone please tell me how to say a
I looked it up.
chronodrome? Okay, how do you
I
say it? How do you say it?
I googled this and I said pronounce
Pronounce it.
Ekranoplan. It's a chronoplan.
A
It
chronoplane.
is, and no plan, no e
Plan. A
on the end.
chronoplan.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Russian word. Um, you know, not to jump in and steal your thunder, but I started my nerd stuff kicked in, as you said. And yeah, I looked up and I was going back, and it's like, wow, in 1986, the Russians made this thing. It's called the Caspian Monster. It's like
Yep.
beached,
Yeah.
and you can go see it,
I know.
right? And super super interesting to read about this thing, and how you look on the top of it and you're like, are those jet engines? No, it was actually like 8 missile launchers, and this thing was gonna go in ground effect, go faster than a boat, lower than a plane, right below, in theory, radar, and then take some pot shots at our aircraft carriers, right? And that's what this thing was designed to do. So pretty wild, right? And I guess it's the only operational chronoplan that I could see, and it's actually classified as a maritime vessel because it's flying around down there in the water. At least this one was, the Loon, also dubbed the Caspian Monster, as we said. So, pretty interesting, right? Faster than a boat, less fuel than an airplane. Flies that low profile, hard to detect, and then it's got a good capacity as well. So, pretty interesting, right? And then we've kind of looked at it too. The Liberty Lifter, right, which DARPA
Hmm.
was developing, and now I'm
Was
reading has
doing.
been canceled, right? So, and then Gravy, I think the article you sent was about China looking into this as we're canceling it, right? So,
Well, we're canceling at that
it's
scale. Like, so we cancel
yeah,
at that scale. And the I ran into this tech probably 2.5 years ago at a show. I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the defense industry shows, and I very quickly zeroed in on this technology, this wing and ground effect technology, because I remember the Acronoplane, even though I couldn't even mentally pronounce it. I remember seeing a picture of it. I didn't know China was working on it. And then so I started Googling on this thing. And there's a bunch of companies that have made these smaller craft, and they are craft. They are not aircraft. They are watercraft or water vessels, which is interesting because now you don't need to license them as aviators. You don't have to follow FAA rules or anything like that. So it's in a completely different category of, like, I don't know, NTSB or whatever it is that you got to follow to go operate the dang thing. But what I found so super interesting was that the Econoplane was huge, the Liberty Lifter was huge, the Chinese just built this thing that's huge, and we have now gone small. And that seems to be the thing that's really catching fire in the defense industry, that really has a bunch of folks, at least in the acquisition world, excited, right, as a capability. So I wanted to bring that up. Like, what do you guys think? First, like, the size difference. Does it got to be big? Can it be small? And then how do a bunch of small aircraft, proliferate across the battlefield or the water space so that we can then go, I don't know, do things, right? So, Boyle, I'll throw it over to you. What do you think?
Sure. So there's a lot of commercial companies that are out there around the world who have taken advantage of this probably the most successful. I can't remember the name of the company, but they're in Singapore, and it's a water taxi service going across the main bay there in Singapore. But it's fairly recent and very successful. But when I think about wing and ground effect in the Pacific, and I think about just how big the swells get, I just can't wrap my head around. Basically, you're going over a mountain that's moving, and there's other mountains and whitecaps and things like that. Yes, on a flat, glassy surface, a nice bay, a nice harbor, that kind of thing makes sense. I'm not convinced that across a gigantic ocean with all the things that an ocean can throw at you, that maybe it's going to work out as as envisioned. Maybe it will. There's also a lot with, and Gravy, you and I saw a lot of this with, and it's totally different, right? But the amount of effort that it takes to take off and land something, even though if you're just going in ground effect off of the water, is really, really hard. And there's a lot of lessons learned that our Japanese allies have done with their US-2s. They are the world leaders in, kind of amphibian aircraft. It's something that we don't know about in the US when it comes to maintenance, engines, the water that you need to shoot into the engine in case you get salt spray in there. I mean, you have to do that like right away. Otherwise, it's going to end up choking out the motor, further down range. With these things, again, I think about, okay, what's the knock-on effect if we're going to have many of these small ones out there proliferated out, and let's say it can overcome the gigantic peaks and valleys that the Pacific Ocean has, even on its most calm day. You still need to put fuel out there for these things. You still need to have some sort of maybe you can beach it. I don't know. Are they sturdy enough to do those kinds of things? Again, we're looking at commercial type of efforts that are happening right now, and how do you now militarize it in a militarized environment? So to me, there's a lot of unknown with these. It's a cool idea. It would solve a lot of the, would help answer some of the logistical challenges that planners are wrestling with. But I don't know. I'm not convinced yet that, it's an answer out there or a viable answer. Maybe it will be. But again, I just think about what it's like on planet Earth to actually operate something out in the ocean, and just how challenging it is. And I have yet to see anybody kind of come and answer those kinds of things.
Planet Earth with people shooting at you.
Yeah.
Well, I did, Gravy, probably one of those weeks when I was working for you in Eglin, when I just didn't show up for a few days. I did go get my seaplane license
That's where you
in
were.
Orlando. So, it can be choppy, right? And I thought the hardest part of it was taxiing the plane on the water, getting it on step on the waves, and then being able to kind of hold that. And so that was the first place my head went to, Boyle, was like, man, like what kind of waves can this thing handle? And I was just out fishing with one of the kids for their birthday, and we were doing the rockfish fishing there off of San Diego, and it was a relatively calm day, but you could see he was getting a little woozy and stuff. And so it's like, man, 3 to 5 is nothing,
Oh, yeah.
Now, it said on Wikipedia, at least, the little Caspian monster there could handle 8-foot waves, which is crazy, right?
Wow.
And as I'm reading these articles that you're sending, Gravy, like, this is not necessarily, I think these things will be aircraft. I think they will be amphibian planes, because it does say that maybe they would have performance to take off and fly at a low altitude, not as efficiently, right? But I think that's your weather mitigator, right? Like, okay, I guess we're going to burn a lot of gas here and get over this rough spot, right? Or if you are, once you're going and something is bigger, I think it would be able to handle those swells better. Now, once you get to something smaller, 100%, right? It's going to be very difficult unless the conditions are light. And I did land in the Pacific in a seaplane. There's San Diego seaplanes out of Montgomery Field. I did a proficiency, flight a few years ago, and we landed off of Coronado out in the Pacific Ocean. It was obviously a calm day, right? And you're beyond the breakers there. So, and then we, took off again. So it's possible, right? But that's where my head goes to. If you go smaller, you're going to have more issues with those swells. The biggest thing that was operational can handle the 8-footers. So you're going to have to be able to get airborne, probably to get around, the obvious weather and the waves there.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of folks trying to solve this problem. One of the things I've seen is a hydrofoil, where it's a hydrofoil just gets up on plane first, so it can handle a little bit larger swells. But then again, in my mind, as I'm thinking through Indo-Pacific and first island chain, second island chain operations, is like, okay, well, what if you need to land on terra firma on the ground? Is what if you can't land in the water? What if you need to land on the ground? What if you need to roll onto the ground, and not stay in the waves for whatever reason? So I'm sure they figured all that stuff out. I mean, these guys are spending enough money and hiring the right people. They'll figure it all out. The other thing I've seen, which I thought was pretty cool, was a couple of jets, small turbofans on the front that would just lift it temporarily over the large swells, and then it would just ride the backside. So like a temporary boost of power to get you over,
Hmm.
Boyle's giant mountain. But here, in my head, I'm like, man,
Everybody's barfing on that thing.
right. I'm like, I
You
live
just turn on a jet engine for a second and don't tell the people in the back.
like, dude,
It's
I've
great.
lived through every helicopter in the inventory. Like I've made it. I'm not going to lose it on that, dude. I'm not
Yeah.
going to lose it. Like I've flown a Huey in the middle of the Indian Ocean with like no one around to save me. My buddy flying with my leg hanging out the door, right? So it's like I lived through that. I don't need to have another experience. I think the idea is cool. The other thing I think is a major challenge is powertrain. I know I know you have thoughts on this, Lenny, but what are your thoughts on all electric versus hybrid versus, fossil fuel pure engine?
Oh man, I just don't know initially if you're going to have, and you guys have probably seen some of the civilian electric companies out there with the aircraft. Super cool, right? I met a few guys that fly them, or some of their test pilots are just trying to get the word out there about them. Smooth ride, right? I think they love the convenience of it. Quieter ride in the cabin. All those things are great. But I haven't heard of at least a civilian size one, thinking on the size of like a 172 that's getting more of about 40 minutes on a flight right now. And I'm just not sure the tech is there to be electric for the ranges, that we're talking about. I mean, this, again, I go back to the Caspian monster and 100,000 pound capacity, right? That's a lot to be working on
Golly.
there via
So
electric, right? And the ranges were ridiculous too.
right.
We're obviously talking, combat radius of a fighter earlier, double that for the range of, this monster size, thing the Russians built. So I'm just not sure that it's there yet with electric. Hybrid, certainly potential, right? There's a lot of companies working on those motors, but I think near term, if you were going to do it, you're probably going to do this with your conventional fossil fuels, even though there's some limitations there. But if you could get the hybrid tech going, especially if it's going to consume less because it is in ground effect, then that's probably a really good option for maximizing the range out of this thing.
Range. Boyle, what do you think? Range, minimum range for the Indo-Pacific.
You need at least, I'm just going to throw out 2,000 miles on there,
It's
at
up there.
least. And then let's say maybe you can with, with mini motors, a little bit smaller, all electric, and maybe they can do modeling for that. But the minute you lift out of, and with the benefits of ground effect, but the minute you have to lift out of ground effect, like Lenny was saying, maybe they can, like, we're going to elevate to 100 feet, let's say, to get over a patch of rough weather or whatever it happens to be, or an obstacle or something like that. Then what does that do to the range? Like, how much is it eating the minute you
Right.
get out of ground effect?
It's bad,
Yeah.
from the articles that you sent out, right? It would be much, obviously, have reduced speed, reduced lift, and increased fuel burn because it's not optimized as an airplane,
Yeah.
right? So you'd be burning through your fuel supply, whether that's electrical charge or power. I mean, if you can find a way to use like waves underneath to regenerate your batteries, like, hey, great, But
Plop it in the ocean for
not
8 hours,
sure.
let it
Yeah, just
recharge.
let it charge back up, right? Maybe that's a feature that can come in
Yeah. Yeah.
future
Well,
future models.
they're going to put a Peloton in the back, and then there'll be a Lance Corporal pedaling really hard
Just
to keep
oars
it.
for
Yeah.
all the puking passengers that can all
Yeah.
That's
grab
right.
one and start
I think
rowing.
that's
Worst
I
case.
think that's fantastic. And now you guys know what it's like in the acquisition world. There you go. You're like, this thing come with oars? You don't want to
Yeah.
ask that in the pitch brief. That, it's a little gauche. Okay, wing and ground effect. I think it's awesome. I was actually kind of disappointed to hear that DARPA stopped the Liberty Lifter program. It's almost like the spruce goose. You just want to see it fly once. But I get it, man. You can't spend all those resources to build that thing and then not reproduce it. Doesn't make any sense for the company, for the government. It's just a waste of taxpayer dollars. But it's like one of those ideas that you think should be operationally relevant. Like it should be. But the Econoplane, they only built one. I bet you the Chinese only build one now that our Liberty Lifter program's canceled. Why would they keep going if we stop? And it seems like the only thing that works is the US-2s from Japan,
Yeah,
like just straight up, flying boats. I don't know. I just hated being in the pattern with them. That was terrible.
it was terrible. But with the wing and ground, I think it's worth exploring, and I'm glad folks are looking into it. Um, maybe all of our considerations, smart people are thinking about. But one point that you brought up right at the beginning of this topic, Gravy, was you don't have to certify people as aviators, but make no mistake, the people can, you know, operating these things are going to dress like aviators. They're going to insist on flight suits. They're going to wear, brown leather boots, just like
Oh
the
yeah.
LCAC drivers who called it, like, oh, we were piloting the LCAC. Like, dude, you're not piloting
Right.
you're skating on ice. You're basically oh my God, what's the Canadian ice game? You throw the big weight down the ice. Oh my God, ice luge.
Curling,
Yeah,
base,
curling,
Curling.
base is
curling,
There you
curling.
curling.
go.
Thank you, base. You're basically
Man.
curling in an LCAC. That's what you're doing. You're not
I think
flying.
base is offended. I think they must be avid
Yeah, they
curlers
must be
because they
curlers.
jumped
You
right
know,
on that.
I mean, it's pretty simple. Anytime you can run out of fuel and nothing crashes, like that is not flying, right? So it's like if, and I was even extend this probably to UASs, right? You're a UAS operator. You operate the thing, right? Because if you run out of fuel, you're not dying, you're not crashing. It's the same with the LCAC. You run out of fuel. Oh, I guess I'm just going to sit here in the ocean until I get bailed out, And with this thing, I guess you just kind of like just put it down like 10 feet, something
Yeah.
like that. I don't know. All right. Well, now that we bagged on a few people, that feels good. I'm going to feel better tonight going to sleep. Makes me feel better about myself and my retired status of not flying whatsoever. Okay. Are we good on topic 3? Anyone else? Any reattacks on that? Good. Okay.
Good.
Now,
I mean,
yeah.
just so everyone, like the principle of it, I'm sure folks know what ground effect is or they can Google it, but it is that cushion of high pressure air,
Yep.
right? As the wing pushes down, there's high pressure air that reduces your drag, right? That's what's giving that's why it's so advantageous for that, increased lift from that air and then that reduced drag, particularly at the wingtip vortices, by that high pressure air underneath you. So just to nerd out for 1 minute, just that's why it's beneficial. That's why you get less fuel consumed and more speed than if you were up at altitude. But
Yeah, it's also why a boil doesn't land within 500 feet of the landing threshold and it's F5 and he floats down
That's right.
4,000 feet down the runway and then smokes his brakes, pulls the chute.
Yep.
you just
That's
kind of
right.
did a little wing waggle, right?
Yeah,
Just
that's right.
kill the
Yeah.
lift, kill the lift, kill the lift.
Yeah, a little Hornet DLC. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, you feel like your main's just reaching for the ground, and you're like, "Please touch the ground, just please. I don't want to chop the power. Oh my God!" And then you chop the power, and everyone makes fun of you for blowing a tire
Roll
somewhere.
out
That's
to the
great.
end of the
Great
runway
news.
when everybody's waiting to take off, right?
I
Yep.
know.
The
I
joys of
know.
floating the landing, but
Yeah.
no
Well,
judgment there.
so I can confidently say in the Harrier, I never floated a landing. That was never the issue. The issue was never floating.
I don't think
Uh,
it glides, right? I think it's
no,
if you chop the power, it just falls, right?
My
So
my favorite thing to do would be to land on the piano keys on a 10,000-foot runway at 60 knots and then roll the length of it to the very end while that, division of Hornets was waiting to take off.
Oh my
And I
God.
could just I could
Yeah.
just roll to the very end of the runway at like 15 knots, because just had to take my time. Didn't want to overheat my brakes, Lenny. Didn't want to.
thanks for that. That was you.
That was me.
I
That was
know.
me. I know. You're welcome. Okay. We're going to close that out. All right. Boyle, doctor, sir, PhD.
Yes.
We need to know what happened this week in aviation history. That's what we need to know.
So there are many things that have happened kind of since our last podcast and now, into this week, having the aviation history. And I'm going to rattle 3 off very quickly that were significant. But then I'm going to get to the most significant historical event that happened kind of this week in military history. So Aviation 1's just real quick. July 1943, the ME-262 had its first flight. In July 1944, the Gloucester Meteor, which was the first Allied jet aircraft, went into operational service with the RAF. July 1969, we had the moon landing. I think Lenny mentioned that last week. That's significant. But the most significant thing that happened in all of military history happened on July 11th, 1798, where Congress passed an act for the establishment and organization of a Marine Corps. That was the most significant military event. So 10 November 1775, the Continental Marines. And actually, this was the date the Marine Corps celebrated as its birthday until 1921, when General June put out his famous message and said, hey, 10 November 1775 is his birthday. And I looked up the act, and just humor me with this. Okay, what did the act say? And it said it would establish, it'd be comprised of a Corps of Marines with 1 major, 4 captains, 16 first lieutenants, 12 second lieutenants, 48 sergeants, 48 corporals, 32 drum and fifes. I don't know where those went. And 720 privates. And then it went further about their pay. And I just think it's interesting that, and I'll just read a couple, to a major, $50 per month and 4 rations per day. To a captain, $40 per month and 3 rations per day. First lieutenant, $30 per month and 3 rations per day. And a second lieutenant got $25 a month, but only 2 rations per day. And I always wondered, when you get your mess dress and it's flared out, we call it the fat man suit. And now I know why. Because majors and above were getting 4 rations or more per day. And everybody else was starving to death, and they could fit into their blues a lot more easily. So there you go. There's your history of the week.
Sounds like an excuse for cake today. Right. If we've got a second Marine Corps birthday to celebrate.
Oh yeah,
I'll be honest.
Right.
With that lead-in you were giving, I thought you were going to say it was the day you got your wings, but 1798 was probably a few years prior.
Yeah, a little early.
My children would say I was there.
Well, it's good. I'm sitting a little taller now, and that's good history. We probably should have known that date, Lenny. We probably should have led and guessed that right off the bat, but. It didn't say anything about aviators?
No, not yet.
No?
Not quite that early. Yeah,
1798, a little too soon.
The right to wear white suits
maybe.
And roll up your sleeves?
Yeah.
Yeah, they got the drum and fifes, but no aviators in that.
No Friday patches? This is garbage. Congress is always so short-sighted, right? And stingy on the pay. My goodness, 2 rations per day? No way.
Yep.
Talk about inverted. Your metabolism when you're a lieutenant is a flipping race car, right? And when you're a major,
they should have the 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right. Hey, quick hot take from me. This is pretty simple. The greatest naval aviation movie of all time is Flight of the Intruder. Prove me wrong.
Oh my God.
Good luck. I mean, you're both trying. Yeah. You can't.
The greatest aviation movie of all time?
Naval aviation.
Naval aviation movie.
I even had to get past True Lies, which had an AV-8B in it. I had to get past that to get to Flight of the Intruder. I think it's the greatest naval aviation movie of all time.
See, I'm going to push back on that. And I will say, seriously, the Bridges over Tokari. If you guys have seen that one.
Been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Lenny?
Yeah, I don't know. I like the scenes in Midway. I thought that was a classic one that really kind of, showed the battle, showed the perspective of the aviators, how difficult it was back then to do stuff. And then, certainly, if you're talking greatest in terms of entertainment, we can't get away from this show without talking about Top Gun, and so I think you got to look at the original Top Gun as a good fictional, entertaining naval aviation movie that probably roped in a ton of recruits to this profession.
I mean, I didn't get past my first MOTS, surface to air missile countertactics brief, when I briefed shutting down the engines, to enroll inverted. Remember to fool the IR missile that was coming at me, or the radar missile that was coming at me. I had to shut down the engines because Virgil Cole told him to, right? You guys need to go watch it again, man. The dudes shut down their engines, roll inverted, and pulled a maneuvered from a radar missile. I was like,
It's technique.
Okay,
Technique.
sure, that works. That works.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I'm on travel. Maybe I'll queue it up tonight. But if I only make it 5 minutes, I'm gonna write to you on X that I'm already done with it.
No, the opening scene's great. Remember his Wizzo or whatever they called that thing that sat in the seat right next to him gets shot in the neck.
BN.
Yeah, Gord, is that his name? Can't remember. Anyway, he gets jacked right in the beginning, blood spurting everywhere. Come on, it's a great movie. You got to watch it. Okay. So man, that's it. That's my hot take. Neither of you proved me wrong. I still feel it's the greatest movie of all time. And we'll go from there.
Greatest movie of all time.
Of all time.
Greatest.
That's for you.
I'll qualify. Naval aviation movie of all time. Okay, so that's it for me, man. You guys got any reattacks on anything the last few episodes you want to talk about, or correct, or rectify?
I want to correct you on the pronunciation of a chronoplan. I told you, and you kept saying plane. So I'm gonna reattack that for you.
Oh my God!
I told you like 3 times, and you said it like 6 more times wrong. So
as an American, I reserve the right
tonight.
I reserve the right to say words the American way, and that's however the hell I want. So
yeah.
Also as a Texan, so that's what I'm doing.
And I'll throw out Devotion. That was another really good aviation movie that was recent. Right Stuff. Right. So we're gonna go greatest of all time, and we're gonna
final countdown.
Yes.
Classic.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yes.
It sounds like we need a show for this. Okay.
Let's roll them. We need to roll them next week.
Yeah. Other than my pronunciation and inability to remember the day of the week last week, what finds do we have? Base gonna pop up with anything on the chat? Finds?
I don't know. Let's see.
I don't see anything. We also didn't know what curling was. That's pretty weak.
Yeah, that was weak.
That's very weak. You guys have the memory of goldfish. It's terrible. No, that's it, man. Okay. Well, no fines from base.
We're clean.
Oil,
clean on the fines.
I think it's time. Exo's on the way, guys. So you guys better get back to work. I'll catch you next time. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Gravy.
Thanks.